All right, you guys, let's continue our talk about solving quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. And let's start to talk about some application problems. So let's look at this first one. So the directions say solve using the quadratic formula. So it says, after the discussion of quadratic functions in class, Madeline is eager to practice what she learns. She goes to the last floor of Building 4 of the Osceola campus and throws an object up in the air. The function that models this scenario is given by h of t equals negative 16t squared plus 32t plus 92, where h of t is the height of the object above the ground and t is the time in seconds. She wants to find out when the object will hit the ground. Okay, so they gave us this function here, h of t equals this equation, okay? And they told us that that equation represents the height of our object, okay? So the first thing that we need to do, she says that Madeline wants to find out when the object will hit the ground, okay? So in order to solve this, we have to know what the height of the object is at the ground. Well, we're assuming that if you're at the ground, then your height equals 0, okay? So that means that we're going to set our equation equal to 0, okay? And once we do that, we see that our equation is already in standard form. So since it's in standard form and they want us to use a quadratic formula, our next step is to identify what A, B, and C are. Okay, so A is negative 16, B is 32, and C is 92. Okay, so we're going to plug that into the quadratic formula. So we know the quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so we plug our values in. Okay, so we plug them all in the first line. Okay, we go through and we simplify in the second line. Okay, so we did 32 squared, which was 1,024, and then we did negative 4 times negative 16 times 92, which was 5,888. Okay, we combine the numbers that are underneath the radical, and we get 6,912. Okay, now the number underneath that radical is very large, so we're going to try to break that down. Okay, so we break down the square root of 912 into primes as follows. Okay, since it's a square root, we pull out our numbers that are in pairs out, and the number that doesn't have a pair, which is the 3, will stay underneath the radical. So we do 3 times 2 times 8, and that gives us 48 on the square root of 3. So once we've simplified that, we can plug it back into our problem. Okay. And then when we look at our coefficients, when we look at negative 32, 48, and negative 32, all of those coefficients are divisible by 16. So I divided them all, which gave me negative 2, 3, and negative 2. Okay. Now, because they're interested in the time, I don't want to leave my answer like that. I plug it into the calculator. So remember, this is two separate answers. One of these answers is negative 2 plus 3 on the square root of 3 over negative 2. And the other one is negative 2 minus 3 on the square root of 3 over negative 2. Okay? When we plug those values into the calculator, we get two answers, negative 1.598 and 3.598. Okay? Now, because this value is representing time, we have to get rid of the negative value because we don't measure time negatively. So the only answer we're going to keep is 3.598. Okay? That's going to be our answer that we accept. Okay? Awesome. All right, let's look at another example. Okay, let's look at this one. So it says directions, solve using the quadratic formula. It says the product of two consecutive positive even integers is 624, and find the two integers. Okay, well, let's break down what those directions say. Okay, so the first thing, they want us to find the product. Okay, well, product means, okay, that you are multiplying two things together. Product translates into multiplication. All right, then they want us to find consecutive, okay? Consecutive means that the numbers come one after another, okay, in a row, in a line, okay? Then they also want us to find, and they have to be positive even integers. So even means that numbers that are divisible by 2. All right, and then it says is. So once we multiply them together, is translates into equals. So their sum should be 624, okay, when we put them together. And then they want us to find those two integers. Okay, so we don't know what those two integers are, so I let the first one be x, okay? So that means that the second integer would have to be x plus 2. So an example, the way that you can think about this, if it has to be a positive even integer, the first one would be 2, okay? So if we were to just count, the next positive even integer would be 4. So if x is the first one, how do you get to 4 from 2? Well, you would have to add 2 to whatever your first value is. That would ensure that it's going to be even and that it's going to be positive, okay? So my first integer is x, my second one is x plus 2, and is, they have to equal 624 when I multiply them together, okay? So I simplified that, okay? We have to multiply x times x plus 2, so we're going to distribute the x to the two terms, and they equal 624, okay? At this point, I see that they're going to be quadratic, okay? Since they're quadratic, I need to put it in standard form. So I subtract 624 from each side to put it in standard form, okay? And then once it's in standard form, since they want me to use a quadratic formula, I need to identify what A, B, and C are. So A is 1, B is 2, and C is negative 624. So then I plug those values into the quadratic formula. So we know that the quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, okay? So I plug my values inside of the quadratic formula, okay? And I simplify. So 2 squared is equal to 4. Negative 4 times 1 times negative 624 is 2,496. When I add 4 and 2,496 together, I get 2,500, okay? 2,500 is a perfect square, and the square root of 2,500 is 50, okay? So when I get here, remember that's two answers. One of them is negative 2 plus 50 over 2, and the other one is negative 2 minus 50 over 2. So when I simplify the first one, I get 48 over 2, okay, which simplifies to 24. And the second one is negative 52 over 2, which simplifies to negative 26. Now, at this point, I have to be careful because my question asked for two positive even integers, okay? Key word is that they needed to be positive. Well, the two answers that I got was 24 and negative 26. So the negative 26 I have to throw out because it's negative, okay? So I keep the 24, okay? And our two integers from originally, they were x and x plus 2. So I just found x was 24. So if I add 2 to it, 24 plus 2, that gives me 26. So my two positive even integers is 24 and 26. Cool. I hope this makes sense.